I am Frank Giles, editor-in-chief of AgNet Media, and I'm joined again by Matt Joyner, the executive vice president and chief operating officer of the Florida Citrus Mutual. Matt, welcome.
It's Frank, good to be with you today.
Well, in the January issue of Specialty Crop Grower Magazine, we published the first round of the results of our annual citrus state of the industry survey, which focuses largely on Florida. And then we had you on to talk about those results. And then in our February issue of the magazine, we published the second round of results. And generally, the results were positive. The things growers were seeing in the groves based off of the new therapies that they're putting out, some of these new varieties that they're planting. However, unfortunately, since we first talked for the January issue and the survey was conducted, we've had a fairly significant freeze come through Florida in late January and early February. So we thought we'd have you on to talk a little bit about what you're hearing from the growers that Mutual represents and just hearing general assessments. I know it's still early. We're only about 10, 12 days from the freeze, but what are you hearing out there?
Oh, Frank, you're right. It is early. Certainly hearing a lot of frustration, quite frankly, because as you rightly pointed out, and I think even as the survey results are bearing out, we're seeing some good impacts on tree health and production and quality as a result of some of the therapies and other things that have been deployed in the groves, and so had made it through hurricane season, and certainly we're not anticipating this hard freeze, a freeze like we haven't seen in a couple of decades. So it's a tough blow as we continue to look to recover and sort of move the paradigm on greening. Nonetheless, I do think that we have evidence out there that these therapies are working, and even in the midst of the freeze, we're still, I had two different growers send me fruit tests with pretty remarkable quality in their Valencias this week. So, the freeze damages, it varies. Obviously, we cover a lot of acreage throughout the state, and so very dependent on where you were as to what that damage is. And certainly up on the ridge, seems like fared a little better than some of the lower areas. It seems to be more of a fruit than a tree issue. I'm not hearing a whole lot yet, at least in terms of particularly on the little bit more mature trees, split wood, that sort of stuff is not seeming to be kind of the standard. We are hearing about some fruit damage. Throughout, and obviously some areas that really got impacted heavily. Young trees, definitely, particularly ones that had gone in the ground over the last few months, really weren't established. We're hearing quite a bit of potential loss there, and even seeing that riding around. You're seeing some of these young trees that probably are not going to make it. In my kind of being out in the field this week, even seeing more dieback every day, I think, and a little more fruit on the ground, and that's probably going to be expedited with the warmer weather that's coming. And so, unfortunately, we haven't seen a freeze. Well, fortunately, we haven't seen a freeze like this in a couple of decades, but unfortunately, we're seeing the impacts kind of unfolding real time. I think every day you go out and you see a few more brown curled leaves, a little more fruit on the ground, and a few more stories from growers that are trying to get in and harvest about maybe how that fruit's impacted. So, yeah, this one we certainly know is going to be impactful, and in some areas probably some devastation. But it's just early to put numbers to that yet.
I was at a blueberry event yesterday where they're touring some of the damage that has happened in blueberries, and some of the other crops were discussed. And the damage in some of these other crops is much more evident, much more quickly. And statewide, this looks like it's going to be a pretty devastating event. Commissioner of Agriculture Wilton Simpson was at the blueberry event yesterday, and he was talking about the wheels are already turning in discussions about relief packages and what that might look like. I'm sure Mutual is probably involved in that. Talk a little bit about what's happening from your end in terms of these larger discussions.
Absolutely. So, very quickly post-storm, we were in contact with FDACS and have stayed in contact with them. We've got our grower survey out. We're compiling data now. You're right. There's row crops and some of the other impacted commodities that it's pretty easy to walk out in the field, unfortunately, and say, here's the loss, and it's pretty well complete. We're trying to glean just what the impacts to citrus are and report that data to the commissioner's office, working with growers to make sure that we're getting even this early as accurate a picture as we can get. And so I am optimistic that we'll have a real advocate in Commissioner Simpson and certainly the commodity groups. We all have been on the phone multiple times together to talk about how we work together, both in Tallahassee and Washington, to communicate the extent of the damage that we've seen, not just in citrus, but across the ag sector here in Florida, because it is going to be impactful and we are going to need assistance to help growers recover and rebound from this event.
And I think one of the take home messages for growers listening to and watching this is to document the damage very completely. There's a lot of tools with your phones and everything else where you can take pictures and keep a record of that. That's important for their own purposes, but also reporting that to folks like Mutual and others to help in this push to get these relief funds when they come along.
That's absolutely right, Frank. We need data and we need good data to be able to share. The university has a survey out, and to the extent growers can participate in that, that's helpful. Mutual, we have sent our survey out. We will continue to refresh that survey, get it into the top of growers' inboxes, and there are aspects to mutual survey that are not picked up maybe in the universities and some of the other surveys. And so we all work together to compile the most complete set of data. And so I would encourage growers, as you say, document with your phone, take pictures, and make sure that you're responding to these surveys so that we can compile that data, because the more data rich this is, the better able we are to advocate for relief. And we have, because of the growers, basic in response to these surveys over the years, our growers are good about getting this information to us, and it has yielded good results over the years in terms of disaster relief. So I would just encourage growers. I know there's a lot going on post freeze, a lot that growers are having to do to try to get fruit in and start to recover from this. But if they can take time to provide that information to Mutual, it's going to yield dividends in the end.
Well, with that, Matt, we'll wrap it up, and we really appreciate you joining us and all the efforts that you guys are doing to help growers out after this storm.
Absolutely, Frank. Thank you.